My cousin tricked our grandpa into leaving me out of the will, so I bought the company he worked for and demoted him to the mailroom. It always starts with family. When people tell you blood is thicker than water, they never mention how often it stains. My cousin Daniel and I grew up like twins born a year apart, same birthday month, same school, same babysitter. Our families used to joke that we were the two golden boys. Grandpa especially loved calling us that. He'd ruffle our hair and say, "You two will carry the name forward. Just wait and see." But there was always a quiet war going on beneath the surface. Daniel was slick. The kind of kid who always knew how to say the right thing in front of adults and get away with murder behind their backs. Teachers loved him. Coaches adored him. But I was the one who stayed late to clean up after practice. I was the one helping Grandpa clean out the garage or fixing the remote when he thought it was broken but the batteries were just dead. To Grandpa, we were both grandsons. But to Daniel, I was just the guy in the way. The first crack came when we were 17. Grandpa gave us each an old watch from his collection. He said they were sentimental, and it didn't matter that they weren't expensive. Mine had a crack in the face and smelled faintly of oil. I loved it. Daniel's was newer, shinier. At dinner that night, he said, loudly enough for the whole table to hear, "Thanks for the spare, Gramps. I'll save this for when I work in the mailroom." Everyone laughed, except Grandpa and me. Fast forward to college, I went for engineering. Daniel, business. We both went to state schools, but he dropped out sophomore year to pursue entrepreneurial opportunities. That turned into managing a vape shop, then hopping job to job, eventually landing as a sales guy at a mid-tier logistics company. The kind of place where you wear a suit jacket but nobody knows what anyone really does. I graduated top of my class, landed a job in Chicago, worked long hours, taught myself code on the side, and eventually joined a startup that exploded. By 28, I had equity. By 30, I had money. That's when I started looking into small businesses, acquisitions, quiet purchases. I liked the idea of building something stable, something that would outlive hype cycles. But just before any of that happened, my world tilted. Grandpa passed. It wasn't sudden, but it still felt like someone unplugged the sun. He'd been the glue, the storyteller, the one who still sent birthday cards with $20 bills tucked in. I flew home for the funeral. Daniel gave the eulogy. He made it about himself, of course, how Grandpa had always believed in him, how they used to have private conversations about family legacy and trust. I thought it was weird at the time, vaguely gross. But grief fogs things, and I was too busy hugging my mom and watching my aunt crumble. It wasn't until 2 weeks later that I got the call from Grandpa's lawyer. The will had been updated 3 months before his passing. Daniel was left the bulk of the estate, the house, the coin collection, the remaining shares in a local courier company Grandpa had invested in decades ago. Me? I got a letter, a one-page note in Grandpa's shaky handwriting. "You're smart and strong and will make your own path. I love you dearly, but Daniel needs this more. I hope you'll understand." I stared at that paper for hours. And then I called the lawyer again, who helped draft this. He hesitated. Turns out, Daniel had introduced Grandpa to his own legal guy, who just so happened to offer free will revisions for senior clients. No one else had been in the room. No family. Just Daniel and the attorney. There was nothing I could do to reverse it. It was airtight. And just like that, my cousin became the proud owner of Priority One Express, a small, 25-person logistics outfit that mostly handled same-day medical deliveries. And me? I was left with memories, a cracked watch, and a bad taste in my mouth. For a while, I told myself to let it go. Grandpa had made his choice, even if he'd been manipulated. But closure is a myth, and something about the way Daniel started bragging on Facebook, posting photos of his new company, adding CEO to his LinkedIn, rubbed me raw. He started showing up at family events in suits, bringing cheap wine with expensive-looking labels. One Christmas, I overheard him telling my little cousin that not everyone's cut out to run a business. That's when I started digging. I researched the company, quietly, found out they were profitable but barely growing. Their tech was outdated, their routing software, ancient, their fleet was inefficient. And best of all, Daniel hadn't bought out the other shareholders. He owned 30%. A controlling share, yes, but vulnerable if the others weren't loyal. I hired a business consultant to reach out anonymously to them, offered to partner on improving operations in exchange for equity. One of them bid, then another. And after 6 months of quiet negotiations and careful positioning, I bought them out. Daniel had no idea. He still thought I was just the cousin in tech. The paperwork cleared on a Thursday. By Friday morning, I was the majority shareholder of Priority One Express. And Daniel? He was still wearing that CEO name tag like a crown made of cardboard. What he didn't know was that his reign was already over. I had a plan. Not for revenge, but for balance. For respect. And maybe, just maybe, to prove that Grandpa hadn't been wrong. He'd just been tricked. Once I had majority ownership, the first thing I did was keep quiet. I didn't march into the office like some movie villain. I didn't fire anyone or rearrange desks or slap my name on the door. That's not how you build trust or take someone like Daniel down. Not for good. No, I waited. The key to revenge isn't speed. It's precision. Instead, I scheduled a meeting with the COO, an older guy named Mark who'd been with Priority One since the faxes and pagers era. He didn't like Daniel, something I could tell within 10 minutes of talking to him. Apparently, Daniel showed up late to leadership calls, promised tech upgrades that never came, and once tried to expense bottle service from a Vegas weekend as client development. I asked Mark how things were really going. Honestly, he said, rubbing his temple. We've plateaued. Daniel's great at buzzwords, but when it comes to logistics, he couldn't plan a pizza party. That made me smile. Would you stay on if there were new leadership? Mark blinked. Are you offering? I'm just asking. Hypothetically. He nodded slowly. Depends on who's at the wheel. Over the next month, I met privately with department heads, reviewed quarterly reports, and watched Daniel operate from behind the curtain. He created a culture of shallow flash, Monday morning pep talks full of empty metaphors, buzzword-laden memos, and motivational posters hung everywhere like they could compensate for actual direction. He loved being called boss. He parked in the founder's spot. And he had a corner office with a couch he never should have bought with company funds. But most of all, he believed his own hype. He thought he was untouchable. The turning point came during a quarterly review where he tried to present an AI initiative to optimize delivery routes. I knew for a fact it was just a rebranded GPS plugin. Worse, he hadn't cleared the cost with anyone. Mark pulled me aside after. This kind of thing. It's why good people leave. That was all I needed. I called an official board meeting the following week. By then, I'd quietly consolidated support from the remaining shareholders and department heads. I didn't even need to use my majority vote, but it felt good knowing I could. We met in the glass conference room at HQ. Daniel walked in late, sipping a smoothie and cracking jokes like usual. He gave me a half hug, leaned back in his chair, and said, "Glad you could make time for the little guys, man. You're still in tech, right? Or are you one of those silent partner types?" I smiled. "Actually, that's what this meeting's about." He frowned. I explained, slowly, professionally, and with full documentation, that I was now the majority owner, that I had acquired the other stakeholders' shares over the past several months. His face went pale, then red. "What the hell are you talking about?" he snapped. "This is my company." "No, Daniel," I said evenly. "It's Grandpa's old investment, one that you were lucky enough to mismanage for 2 years." Silence. I let the board speak next. They backed me, unanimously. Daniel had failed to meet targets, squandered resources, and shown reckless disregard for company finances. We voted to remove him as CEO. It passed. Daniel's chair creaked as he stood up, voice cracking. "You can't do this. Grandpa left this to me." "You mean the shares you convinced him to leave you while he was sick and isolated?" I said, locking eyes with him. "You got 30%. I bought 70%. He tried to argue, but no one listened. Not even Mark, who just handed him a cardboard box. "You'll be reassigned," I told Daniel, "until we review your final contributions." "Reassigned," he sneered. "To the mailroom," I said. His jaw dropped. "You used to joke that I'd end up there," I added, standing. Figured it was poetic. He stormed out, and I let him go. No shouting. No gloating. Just quiet dignity. The next few weeks were wild. I officially stepped in as interim CEO and began auditing every department. I found bloated expenses, neglected partnerships, and a mess of outdated software. But the bones of the company were good. People just needed direction and trust. I gave Mark full control over operations and made sure every department head knew my door was open. Literally, I removed it from my office hinges as a joke. As for Daniel, he showed up the first week, sulking through the mailroom, sorting packages like the world owed him something. I didn't check in on him. I didn't need to. I knew humiliation would do its work. He lasted 4 days. On Friday, he left a passive-aggressive sticky note on my desk that read, "Hope it was worth it." I wrote one back. It was. Then I framed it. It sits next to my cracked watch. Grandpa's, remember? Because the truth is, I didn't do all this to hurt Daniel. I did it to restore something, to make peace with the past, to take the name he dragged through the dirt and polish it back into something I could be proud of. I wish Grandpa could have seen it, but maybe, in some way, he knew. Maybe that letter wasn't a rejection, but a dare. Make your own path. So I did. After Daniel quit, things didn't magically fix themselves. Companies aren't fairy tales, they're made of people, policies, and problems. Still, with the dead weight gone, things got better fast. Mark took the operations playbook I'd helped design and ran with it. We overhauled the fleet contracts, upgraded to smarter route planning software, and brought in a lean logistics consultant who shaved 12% off our annual expenses in the first quarter. For the first time in years, Priority One Express was profitable and scalable. But while the business took shape, the emotional debris from my family still sat heavy. My mom had called twice since Daniel's fall from grace. The first time was all cautious curiosity. "Honey, I heard something happened with the company." I knew what she meant. She wanted gossip. I told her I couldn't talk about company operations, said it was all confidential. She didn't push. She never did when it wasn't about my sister or cousin. My dad didn't call at all. What stung more than their silence was how unsurprised I was by it. Daniel, on the other hand, did reach out weeks later. He emailed me a single line: "Hope you're proud of yourself. You ruined the family." I didn't reply, because the truth was, he'd done that long before I stepped in. Still, I'd be lying if I said it didn't eat at me. Not guilt, just grief. That lingering ache of knowing the people you once trusted couldn't, or wouldn't, see you for who you were, for what you worked so hard to become. One night, a month after the transition, I stayed late at the office, going over employee review proposals. Everyone had been through a whirlwind, and I wanted to reward the people who stuck it out. That's when Mark knocked on my door with a dusty envelope. "Found this cleaning out the storage closet," he said. "Figured you'd want it." It was an old manila folder labeled Priority One, Initial Investment Agreement, H. Wallace. Grandpa's name. I opened it and found a photo, one I'd never seen before, of Grandpa shaking hands with the original founder, smiling wide in a parking lot full of delivery vans. Tucked behind it was a single sheet of notes in his handwriting. "Invested in this company for the long haul. Not for the money, too old for that, but because the kid running it reminded me of Redacted. Quiet, steady, doesn't talk big, just builds. That's the kind of person I trust." No name was written, but I knew exactly who he meant. I cried right there at my desk. Quiet, the way I always had, like I'd taught myself to do growing up. Not because it hurt, but because maybe, just maybe, Grandpa had seen me. The next morning, I made a decision. I wasn't going to hold on to the bitterness. I wasn't going to let Daniel or anyone else keep renting space in my head. The best revenge wasn't just taking back what I'd lost, it was rebuilding it better. That same week, I started looking at properties. Not for myself, but for an idea I couldn't shake. See, Grandpa's old house, the one Daniel had inherited, had quietly gone up for sale 2 weeks after Daniel quit. I don't know if it was debt, desperation, or just pride, but he couldn't afford to keep it. The listing was discreet, off-market. But I had connections now. It wasn't hard to put in an offer through a proxy. 3 weeks later, it was mine. It felt surreal walking through the front door again. The house was smaller than I remembered, like most childhood places are. But everything smelled the same. Old wood, fading carpet, and a whiff of lemon cleaner. I walked down the hallway, past the room where Grandpa used to read to us, past the kitchen where he'd taught me to make coffee before I was tall enough to reach the machine. And in the living room, I pulled out the photo from the office. I hung it above the fireplace. Then I started calling architects. I didn't want to demolish the house. I wanted to restore it, to make it into something lasting. I told them I wanted a community workspace, a place for young entrepreneurs who didn't come from money or connections, a quiet space to work, to dream, to build, just like I had, alone in my apartment, late at night, when no one believed in me. We broke ground 2 months later. I kept the exterior mostly intact. Grandpa would have wanted that. But inside, we gutted everything. Created open rooms with natural light, fast Wi-Fi, and a small library filled with books on logistics, coding, writing, and business. I named it Wallace House. The day we opened, I invited the whole team, even some people from the neighborhood. I kept it small, personal. Mark gave a little speech. I kept mine short. "Some places," I said, deserve a second chance, just like people do. As the crowd clapped, I looked around the room. At the laughter, the shared food, the quiet conversations between interns and engineers and old family friends who had actually shown up. And for the first time in years, I felt at peace. Not because I'd won, but because I'd taken the pieces I'd been handed and built something no one could take away again. Wallace House took on a life of its own. What started as a personal redemption project quietly evolved into something more meaningful. Within the first 6 months, we had 15 regulars, students, freelancers, even a few middle-aged folks who'd always wanted to launch a side hustle, but never had the space or support. I set up free mentorship hours every Thursday. No pomp, no ego, just people showing up for each other. One afternoon, I found a note slipped into the donation box by the front desk. It was written in tidy block letters. Thank you for this place. I didn't think people like me belonged in places like this. You changed my mind. That note stayed in my wallet for months. But for all the warmth Wallace House brought me, I couldn't ignore the unresolved tension still tethered to my family, especially my parents. They hadn't visited, hadn't called, hadn't acknowledged that anything had changed. Even when word got around that I'd become CEO, bought Grandpa's house, or built something lasting, they stayed quiet. The silence wasn't loud. It was worse. It was cold. I told myself I didn't care, that I didn't need them to see it. But late at night, when the house was empty and the echo of my childhood crept back in, I'd feel the weight settle into my chest again. So I did something that scared me more than anything I'd done so far. I invited them. An email. Simple, formal, polite. I told them we were hosting a small founders dinner at Wallace House. No pressure, but they were welcome to see the space. They didn't reply. Not at first, but 3 days before the dinner, my mom emailed back. We'll come. Briefly. That's all it said. Dinner night arrived. I wore a simple gray shirt, the same kind I used to wear when they tell me to dress smarter. Mark gave another short speech. Guests mingled. Laughter filled the halls. I was pouring lemonade into paper cups when I saw them walk in, my mom in a pressed floral blouse, my dad trailing behind her like a shadow. They looked older, smaller. My mom's eyes scanned the space like she didn't quite understand what she was looking at. My dad just kept his arms crossed, like someone bracing for a verdict. Hi, I said, walking up to them. My mom forced a smile. It's nice. I nodded. Thanks for coming. They didn't ask about the company. They didn't ask about Daniel. Instead, my dad pointed at the photo above the fireplace. Is that your grandfather? Yeah, I said. From the day he made the investment. He looked at it for a long time. And for a second, just one, he looked like he might say something. But he didn't. They stayed for 22 minutes. I know because I watched the clock. As they were leaving, my mom paused at the front steps. You've done well, she said, like the words hurt to say. I nodded again. I had to. She hesitated. Your cousin stopped by last month. Said you ruined Daniel's life. I didn't flinch. I gave Daniel accountability. What he did with it was up to him. My mom sighed. Family should stick together. No, I said softly. Families should respect each other. That's not what I got. Not then. She didn't reply. They left, and I stood on the porch for a long while after, watching the wind sway the tree Grandpa planted when I was 9. I remembered watering it every summer, even when the roots cracked the pavement. I remembered him saying, the strongest things grow under pressure. I finally understood what he meant. A few weeks after the dinner, I got a letter. Not an email, a physical letter, handwritten. It was from my aunt, the only one on that side of the family who'd ever stood up to Daniel. She'd heard what happened. She wanted me to know that Grandpa would have been proud, that not everyone in the family bought into the narrative Daniel spun after his fall. She ended it with, sometimes the people closest to us can't see us until we're standing in front of them holding a mirror. You've built one hell of a mirror, kid. I laughed, then cried. And then I got back to work. Because Wallace House wasn't just about healing. It was about building a future. We partnered with a local trade school to offer free workshops. We launched a grant for underfunded creators. And we started something I called the Fire List, a collection of names, stories, and goals from people who'd been told they couldn't make it. Every person who joined wrote their own fire, the insult or doubt that once crushed them. Then they wrote what they did with it. Mine was first on the wall. He's not built for business. Dad. Response. CEO. Founder. Builder. That wall filled up fast. I didn't need my parents to approve anymore. I didn't need Daniel to admit what he'd done. I didn't even need the apology I once fantasized about. Because when people walk into Wallace House, eyes wide and hearts still half broken, I get to look them in the face and say, "You belong here." That's worth more than any inheritance. It started as a sticky note on my office window. I was in a meeting with one of our resident writers, Claire, mid-20s, brilliant, and scared out of her mind. She'd been rejected from 3 MFA programs and had a voice barely above a whisper when she said, "Maybe they were right. Maybe I'm not good enough." I told her, "You know what helped me? Writing down the worst thing someone said about me and putting it somewhere I could see it. Not to hurt me, but to remind me what I survived." She raised an eyebrow, then smirked. "That's either the most toxic or the most badass advice I've ever heard." I laughed. "Maybe both." Later that night, I wrote my own again on a yellow sticky note and slapped it on my office window. "He's too quiet to lead." I stared at it, let it burn a little, and then wrote underneath, "CEO, staff of 67, profitable." The next morning, Claire walked in and added her own. "No one reads Sad Girls. 50K downloads on her podcast in 3 months." Within a week, the entire glass panel wall was full. We had to move it to the north hallway, then the community room. We called it the fire list, because every statement on it was someone's personal fire, burned in by doubt, insult, or betrayal. Some were cruel. "She's too fat to dance. He talks like he's stupid. You're just a backup option." And then there were rebuttals, handwritten in different inks, different styles, all with the same energy. Choreographer, paid to teach in 5 cities. Public speaking coach. Never a backup again. Married to my best friend. It grew. Every week, more cards, more stories. And soon, it wasn't just about revenge, it was about reclaiming space. One day, as I was tacking up a new card, a guy maybe in his early 30s approached me. He had the face of someone trying to figure out if I was that guy. "You run this place, right?" "Depends," I said, half joking. "If you're here to complain about the coffee, that's Mark's fault." He smiled. "I just wanted to say thanks." He pulled a folded note from his jacket and handed it to me. "You're just average. You'll never matter. Now mentoring 5 students. One just got a full ride." That note hit hard, because it mirrored mine almost exactly. "You mind if I ask who said that to you?" I said. He shrugged. "Old boss. He fired me after I had a panic attack in the break room. Told me I was too soft." "Let me guess. Tech?" He nodded. "Startups, man. All grind. No grace." I pinned his note up beside Claire's. And then I realized Wallace House had become more than a space. It was a ledger of proof that people can outgrow the boxes they were shoved into. That soft didn't mean weak. That quiet didn't mean invisible. That betrayal, rejection, ridicule, none of it had the final word. Later that month, something happened I didn't expect. My dad showed up again. I was at the front desk, showing a new batch of interns around, when I saw him through the glass. He looked out of place, holding a folder, stiff in a blazer that didn't quite fit. When he saw me, he didn't smile, just nodded. I met him at the door. "Didn't expect you," I said. "I was in the area," he lied. It was a 40-minute drive. We sat in the courtyard. He didn't ask about the business. He just looked around, hands in his lap. "You built this from scratch?" he asked. "Yeah. With help, but yeah." He nodded. "We should have helped you more." It was the first almost apology I'd ever heard from him. "You believed in Daniel," I said. He didn't answer, just looked down at his hands. After a long silence, he pulled a card from his folder. An old photo of me at maybe 14, sitting at the kitchen table with my first laptop, headphones too big for my head. "We used to laugh at how serious you looked in this," he said. "Didn't realize you were building something." I didn't know I was either. He set the photo down, stood up, and said, "I'm proud of you." It was quiet, stiff, maybe a little rehearsed, but still. I watched him walk out, shoulders hunched like a man unsure if he'd earned the right to say what he just said. Maybe he hadn't. Maybe that's not how healing works. But I felt something shift. Not in him, in me. That night, I added a new note to the fire list. "You'll never matter. Still not sure if I do, but I'm helping other people believe they do." That's the truth. Revenge got me started. But grace, grit, and a little bit of grief, that's what kept me going. This isn't the kind of story that ends in flames. It ends in light. The kind you build slowly, steadily, the kind that lasts. Thanks for reading. And if you've got your own fire, come visit Wallace House. There's always room for one more.